Hello, and welcome to Watch It Played. My name is Pet McDonald, and in this video, we'll be learning the 2 to 5 player game Tiny Epic Kingdoms 2nd Edition, designed by Scott Alms and published by Gameland Games. Though the box is tiny, the kingdoms inside are epic, and it's your job as an aspiring ruler to expand, explore, exploit, and exterminate your foes. From one tiny epic conflict to the next, you must emerge victorious. So, come join me at the table, and let's learn how to play. To set up, first place the tower and action card in the middle of the table, with the 5 shield tokens nearby. Each player will choose a color and take the matching research and tower token, 7 meeples, and one of each type of resource token. I'm setting up for a 3-player game, so I'll return these to the box. There are special rules for setting up and playing 2 and 5-player games, which I'll explain at the end of this video. Shuffle this deck of territory cards, and have players each draw a random one and select which side to use for their home territory. Now each player selects one of these faction cards, or you can choose to draw them randomly. At the start of the game, all factions function identically, but as the game goes on, they can unlock unique special abilities. Place your research token here at the bottom of your magic level, and your tower token below the tower card. Now each player puts 2 of their meeples into a single region of their home territory. Regions are distinguished by very distinct styles of art, and you may not start on a territory showing crags or water. There are 3 types of resources: ore, mana, and food. Each player starts with any chosen combination of 6 of them, which are indicated by placing the tokens on the values of your resource track. The suggested starting resources for your first game are 1 ore, 2 mana, and 3 food, which we'll use here. Set the game's 2 dice nearby, and the first player is the one who has most recently swung a sword, which would likely be me, so I'll take the first player token. If none of the players are cool enough to have swung a sword, feel free to determine this randomly. And that's the setup. Tiny Epic Kingdoms is played over a series of turns, in which players will grow their armies, research new magical abilities, build a colossal tower, and conquer new lands. At the end of the game, the player with the most victory points will be declared the winner. The game begins with the first player, also known as the active player. They will select any one of these actions that does not have a shield token on it, place one there, and then perform that action, or do nothing. But even if they choose not to perform an action, they must still select one. In clockwise order, all other players may then choose to either perform the selected action or collect resources, which we'll talk about later. Keep in mind, the active player is not given the option to collect resources. Once everyone is gone, pass the active player token to your left and repeat this process. An action may not be taken if it has a shield token on it. But if you start your turn and all 5 shield tokens have already been placed, you first remove them all and then take any action you wish. Let's take a look at those actions now, and we'll start with the build action. To perform this, a player must pay the cost in ore of the next level of the tower, moving their tower token there. You can only advance 1 level each time this action is taken, and at the end of the game, you'll score points equal to the value shown here, beside the level you've obtained. So, to move to the first level, I would pay 1 by moving the ore down 1 space on the resource track, and putting my tower token here. I'll need to have 2 ore to spend if I wish to move to the next level later. The research option is similar, but you instead pay the cost in mana of the next level on your faction card. As with the tower, you may only advance 1 level each time this action is taken, marking your current level with the research token. At the end of the game, you'll score points equal to the level of magic that you have obtained. But during the game, you'll also be granted access to the ability listed there, as well as all those below it. Every faction has their own combination of abilities, granting them unique advantages during gameplay. With the expand action, the player adds a new meeple from their supply to a region which already contains one of their meeples. You then pay a cost in food equal to the number of meeples you now have in play. So, if you're adding your 3rd meeple, you must pay a cost of 3 food on the resource track. A region may never contain more than 2 meeples, regardless of color. So you cannot take this action if all the regions you are in are currently full. At the end of the game, you'll score 1 point per meeple you have in play, except those on ruin spaces, which we'll talk about later. With the trade action, you may reduce any number of one resource to gain an equal number of another resource type. For example, a player could lose 2 ore and gain 2 food. The patrol action lets you move one of your meeples from one region to an adjacent region on the same territory card. These regions must share a border, and you cannot move onto water or crag regions, nor can you pass over river lines. The quest action is similar, but this allows you to move a meeple you have in one region on the edge of a territory card to a region on the edge of any other territory card. As before, you cannot move across water, rivers, or crags as part of this movement. And remember, a region may never contain more than 2 meeples, so you could never perform a move that would cause this to happen. Also, you cannot move onto a region containing your opponent's last meeple, nor can you move your last meeple onto a region occupied by an opponent. If you move a meeple into a space containing an opponent, a war breaks out. The moving player is considered the attacker, and the other the defender. Each player takes a war die and secretly selects a number, which they will reveal simultaneously. This number represents the total value in resources the player is willing to spend in the war. You cannot set the value to an amount you cannot pay. Setting the die to this white flag indicates that you wish to offer peace instead, which will cost you no resources. If both players set their die to a white flag, an alliance is formed, and the 2 players will coexist on the same space peacefully, at least for now. In any other case, the player with the higher revealed number is the winner and takes control of the region. In the case of a tie, the defender is considered the winner. Whether they win or lose, both players are required to pay the cost of war which they have selected. Each ore you spend is worth 1 point towards that cost, while mana is worth 2. Food, however, provides no benefit during war. There is a reminder of these values at the bottom of your faction card. During this battle, for example, I selected a cost of 4, which I could pay with either 2 mana, 2 ore and 1 mana, or 4 ore. Once both players have paid their war costs, the winning player keeps their meeple in the warring region, while the losing player may retreat their meeple to an adjacent region that does not contain an opponent's meeple, by paying food equal to the number of meeples they currently have in play. If there is no valid region to move into, or they cannot afford the food cost, or choose not to pay it, their meeple is instead returned to the supply. As mentioned before, if both players avoid war by revealing white flags, they begin an alliance. Even so, they will have to perform war as normal if they enter each other's regions in other locations. Then, if both players select a white flag, peace will continue. However, if one or both of the players do not offer a flag of peace, not only does the alliance end, but this war will count for control of all regions those players share. The losing player must then retreat all of their meeples from each of these regions to adjacent ones, paying for each individually or removing them from play. If an alliance is broken and it would force you to lose your last meeple and you cannot afford to retreat, you must place it in the nearest unoccupied region from where it was retreating, even if that results in placing it on a different territory card. In this case, Gray has lost the war, has no options to retreat, and will lose both meeples. However, as you cannot lose your last meeple, he could be placed here instead. While in an alliance, you may move meeples out of an allied region with no penalty. If this results in no longer having any shared regions with that other player, the alliance ends. And those are all the actions. As mentioned before, when an action is selected, the non-active players in clockwise order may either copy that action or instead collect resources. When collecting, you get 1 resource matching the type of each region you occupy. Forests provide mana, mountains provide ore, and plains provide food. It's important to note that you only gain 1 resource from a location, even if you have 2 meeples there. You may also collect resources from a region you share with an allied player. So in this example, I would gain 2 mana from occupying 2 forest regions, 1 food from the plains, and 1 ore from the mountain. Keep in mind, the maximum you can own of each resource is 9. If you have only 1 meeple in play, you are granted a bonus resource of your choice when collecting. You may have noticed this other region type, which we haven't referred to yet. It's known as a ruins. If a meeple moves into, expands, or starts the game here, it is placed on its side. When you collect resources, each ruins with a knocked over meeple provides 1 resource of your choice. Knocked over meeples are treated normally when defending during a war, or using the expand action, but they cannot move. Instead, if you patrol, you may stand up 1 of your meeples. It will no longer collect resources from the ruins, but you may now move that meeple out of the ruins with a later action. This is a capital city region. It never provides resources, but occupying it will provide victory points at the end of the game. As mentioned before, water and crag spaces are impassable, and cannot be occupied. Rivers are also impassable, and regions split by a river are not considered adjacent. Once each player has taken the action selected by the active player or chosen to collect resources, check to see if any one of these endgame conditions has been met. A player has all 7 of their meeples in play, has reached the 6th level of the Tower card, or has reached the 5th magic level on their faction card. If you reach the end of a turn and none of the endgame conditions have been met, the active player token will pass to the player on the left, and that player will begin the next turn by selecting a new action. If, however, one of the endgame conditions has been met, play will continue until the next time all shield tokens would be cleared from the action card at the start of a turn. At that point, the game ends immediately, even if one of the endgame conditions is no longer being met. Now it's time to add up each player's victory points. Each meeple you have in play, except those in the ruins, grant you 1 point. For example, I have 6 in play, not counting the one in the ruins, and I would gain 6 points. You gain points equal to your highest level of magic achieved. In this example, I have reached the 4th level of magic and would gain 4 points. Reaching this 5th level may also grant you additional victory points, which will be indicated here. The highest level you've achieved on the tower will grant you a number of points shown here on the side. I have reached the 5th level, so I will gain 7 points. Lastly, each capital city you occupy is worth 2 points, or 1 point if shared with an allied player. The player with the most points is declared the winner, having conquered all others. In the case of a tie, check each of these tie-breaking conditions in order until the tie is broken. Whichever player has the most meeples in play. Then check whoever's highest on the tower, then highest magic level, and finally the player with the highest total number of resources remaining. If after all that, players are still tied, they share in the victory. When playing with 5 players, all rules are the same, except that when a player starts their turn and must clear the 5 shields from the action card, their turn is then immediately over and the active player token is passed to the next player. This is done to ensure that during the game, all players have an equal chance to make the first selection of actions. When playing with only 2 players, during setup a 3rd random territory is added, called the Lost Kingdom, which will have each of its accessible regions filled with 1 meeple from a color not being used. These meeples are considered neutral. During the game, any player has the option to invade the Lost Kingdom by moving into one of their regions. If they move into a region occupied by a neutral meeple, they start a war. To win this war, a player must spend resources equal to or higher than the current number of neutral meeples in play. After which, you take control of the region and place the neutral meeple next to your faction card. When counting your score at the end of a 2-player game, you gain 1 victory point for each region of the Lost Kingdom that you occupy, as well as 1 point for each neutral meeple which you have captured. Keep in mind, you cannot start a war with a neutral meeple if you cannot pay the required war cost. You also cannot form alliances in a 2-player game. Players can still select the white flag to avoid paying costs, but if both players do, the defender wins and claims the region. The game also comes with a variant for all player counts, where during setup you randomly place these tokens face down on all accessible empty spaces not currently occupied by meeples. If a player moves to one of these regions, they reveal the token and resolve it using this table in the rulebook. This adds a variety of new effects that can impact gameplay, which I'll leave you to discover on your own. And that's everything you need to know to play Tiny Epic Kingdoms 2nd Edition. If you have any questions at all, don't hesitate to put them in the comments below and I'll gladly answer them as soon as I get a chance. But until the next episode, thanks for watching.